In the next hour or so, my co host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. Happy holidays, actually. We ask that you smash that subscribe and like button so you don't miss anything from us in the future. Also, I'm confident that Lei and I are two of the best in the world at doing this, so help us get the word out about this show to others. My name is Tu Lee. I am the managing director at Sinoauto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. In Beijing for the last couple of weeks, Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning and good evening from Beijing. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 192. 192. I guess this is our last episode,
Could be of the
live
year.
episode of this year, I guess. And happy holidays, exactly. Down to the very last few days of 2024 and very eventful ending to the year, not only in the China NEV space, but global auto industry as well. So the big news this week is the anticipation of Neo Day and the reveal of the Firefly brand. And I'll be headed over tomorrow morning. um, very, I, I, a few weeks ago, I wasn't planning to be even in China, but lucky that that I'm here. So I get this chance to really. It's only my second in-person Neo Day. The first one was 7 years ago, and that was quite memorable. And so looking
I
forward to
got a little
that.
FOMO, Lei. I've
I
been
know you
obviously
did.
invited to
You
these
know,
Neo days, but I'm gonna go to
but
one of them. It's
yeah, sure
just so
enough.
jammed up into Christmas, So
Yeah, sure enough that there will be hopefully Neo days outside of China soon.
I'm certain of it. I am
Yeah.
certain of it.
Shall we talk about Neo Day first a little bit? Firefly. And then I know that there's some data that I shared of this trade-in program that has been quite important in driving up sales the last few months.
Let's do this, Lei, because we picked up some new listeners, viewers over the last year. Can you please tell us what Neo Day is, what the history has been, and then we can get into what's likely going to be announced or unveiled in a week or a couple days after Christmas?
Yeah, so Neo Day actually, to me, outside of the annual Beijing or Shanghai auto shows, it is one of the most important and unique events um, of the calendar year. It's the annual celebration of the users. I'm hearing 20,000 owners are expected to be at this
Gentlemen,
event tomorrow.
wow.
Yeah, that's what I heard, including as we've seen on social media, many owners outside of China have been invited to this event, and it's an annual celebration of the users. It's an event where there's new models, and this year specifically, interestingly enough, the launch of the most expensive Neo, the ET9, as well as the cheapest Not cheap, but pricing wise, cheapest.
Highest
Not
value, or no.
not Neo, but
Now I'm confused. How do I say it?
yeah,
Not value, like
the Firefly brand, and then there's the Neo band, which is formed by Neo owners that all perform their annual Neo song, which this year the theme is together and further. In Chinese, 同行, which means hand in hand, going forward. And obviously, the star of the show will be Li Bin again. He'll recap the year, and then talk about the two products, the product and the brand. Obviously, the Halo car that Herbert D said today in that video. Impossible. It's impossible. Neo, I mean, they just know how to warm up for this event, right? And then the Firefly is really this fingers crossed for
so.
this.
The logo was unveiled this week.
Yeah, it's in the shape of a firefly wings with the light in the bottom. It looks like a Y. Um,
I like
and
it.
yeah, I mean it's youthful. It's the three things they just shared brand attribute is vivid, thoughtful, and solid, which respectively means handling interior space and safety of this brand and this model. Um, and yeah, so lots to look forward to. I think it's the most important and the crucial one yet for Neo, because now there are three brand group. Lots on the plate.
Like BYD.
Yeah, well, yeah, and
Well, technically, BYD is 4
yeah,
because of
yeah,
Denza,
but ambitious, awfully ambitious targets next year in 2025 and 2026. So we'll hear more about what the positioning of the Firefly and the first model. What the new CEO is also very interesting. He came out of Daniel, as Jin, his name is. He came out of Shanghai GM,
Yep.
and a veteran, industry veteran, and he said the most this new car from Firefly would mostly resemble the Megane, not the Megane, the Renault 5 E-Tech.
5.
Yeah, which was unveiled at the Paris Motor Show in terms of how it looks, in terms of the size. So we'll
I got
have
one.
an idea.
It's
Yeah,
right
you have
there,
one.
Lei.
Yeah. So and the catchy phrase is that it's smarter than a mini and more mini than a smart, something like that.
Does it sound better in Chinese? Because that's
You mean the
that's not
brand
that
name?
great. No, the what that's saying, what you just said. It's smarter than a mini.
Well, it's almost like a
B.
B model Y bang, right? So it's
Yeah. It's
B
more catchy.
B mean yeah. I won't get into it. And just a lot of these things building up to this event. Also, early in the week, right, the milestone of 60 million swaps, 2,800
It's amazing. 60 million
swapping
swaps.
stations, and 20 million of those in the last 9 months out of the 6 million, right? Which means battery swapping works. It is a viable business model. It's happening. And we just heard CATL make that big announcement
I was
2 days
just
ago.
going to mention that.
Yeah, yeah. And we should talk about this together for a moment because
CATL
ne-
through their company Alton, AULTON.
well, Alton is separate. Alton is another company, um, but man, ambitious, crazy numbers: 30,000 to 40,000 long-term battery swap stations from CATL alone. Um, so
That is running on assumptions that swapping is going to go mainstream. Foreign OEMs are going to be signing up. There's no way that those numbers make sense with just the China market in without other regions being involved. So
yeah, so
long
a
term.
caveat on calling it mainstream. Um, I think we have seen NIO is kind of the pioneer that made it work, and now mainstream meaning from the perspective of CATL is following NIO's path to try to make it more mainstream. But I still believe, and I've told this to um, AP as well as Jill from TechNode. She wrote something about the CATL that you know how in people that have lived in Beijing knows this. All the ring roads, they have the main road, 主路. They also have the side road, 辅路. So I describe this as the battery swapping still as a side road compared to the charging main road. But in Beijing, if you lived here long enough, you know that sometimes you want to go on the side road because it's faster.
Those in the know,
I think, yeah, those who know. So that's the
Lao Beijing.
analogy. I think, yeah, that's the analogy that I want to compare. That it's still not yet mainstream. I'm not sure if it ever becomes mainstream, but it's becoming an important part of the infrastructure.
Well, I would put it this way, Lei. It becomes an option, a valid option
Yeah.
for Neo owners, for Envo owners, and whoever CATL is able to get on board long term. And when you think about it, as a new EV owner myself, I the fact that charging still takes a very long time and swapping, the thought of it actually is very, very, very attractive, specifically on highways. So even if it wasn't available in a lot of the city and urban areas, having swapping stations along I-75 or whatever highways, major highways are in Massachusetts, that could be really, really attractive. And we always have to look at the history of the automotive space and how brands and OEMs kind of combine and partner
Eh,
because it's too capital intensive to go it alone on certain aspects and certain features. And so I still think that Chinese EV companies will eventually work with American or the D3, D2. Stellantis is already partnering with Leap Motor. So I still see that as a long term possibility for Ford and General Motors working with much closer with these Chinese EV companies. Not sure who yet, but
mhm. I think what's happening at the same time in China and the US in particular is NIO has signed up the swap partners, while Tesla has signed up their NACS partners. So I think both countries that is being that is playing out of these third-party OEMs trying to utilize and enjoy the existing the NEO swap network and the Tesla supercharger network. That'll still take some time. Uh, so I think the issue is, when do we see more other brands start swapping at the NEO battery swap stations, right?
I
The
think
utilization, right?
the-
It's not going smoothly. At the current, it seems at the current pace. Same on the NACS front, right? The issues that have had been happening, right?
the dongles don't work sometimes, and Tesla is not opening up all their supercharging stations
Yeah,
to
yeah.
their partners, and so well, it's always meant to be lumpy, anyways. Lay, we know that. And to answer your earlier kind of point, or at least comment on your earlier point, as these Chinese EV companies get more and more desperate to sell or be relevant in 2025, we should see them begin to embrace CATL or NEO on swapping. Now,
And
does the Chinese government want multiple standards on swapping? Probably not. But if NEO and CATL, the two biggest players on the battery side and on the swapping side, are going to lead the way, I think that's probably the cleanest way to move forward in the China market for swapping.
yeah, it's shaping up to be the big two at CATL and NEO on the swapping side as things look now. But interestingly, is that the first 10 companies that CATL announced do not include NEO. So the wild card is, since they announced the standardized number 20 and number 25, very small battery packs, right?
Hmm.
40, 50 kilowatt hours. The wild card is, do Firefly come on board somehow, or Firefly continues with NEO's own kind of standard? That remains to be seen. Uh, but CATL is obviously starting at a one to many, whereas NEO is one to one. Uh, and I think this is the first time that really CATL has said and publicly said about the standardizing this uh, battery packs number style,
Yep.
in analogy to the gas station numbers, right? In China, is number 92 and 95, which is similar to 87 and 89 in the US, right? Um, and
And we always have to remember, Lay, that we're at around 50% take rate on BEVs and PHEVs in China. In order to get to that 80-90% that Li Ben is talking about, that He Xiaopeng has talked about, we need to get into the lower tier cities. And we then question, in the lower tier cities, are the grids sufficient enough or modern enough to handle plugging in a bunch of vehicles, millions, hundreds of thousands of electric vehicles. And so charging should really take some of the pressure off of that. And I see it as CATL looking to really quickly infiltrate some of the smaller tier cities in order to push that adoption rate even higher in a shorter span of time, as opposed to now the lower tier cities are also going to invest in charging infrastructure, but I think this is kind of a way for them to really uh, build into the lower tier cities more quickly.
yeah, and I think this is great for battery swapping. I don't see it as a either or. I don't see it as a competing. It's always going to be that co-opetition or frenemy style of dynamic in the Chinese market. And because CATL is an investor in the NIO asset company, the
Right.
battery asset company. So somehow they're all intertwined at the same time. They're competing against each other. But you know, just
And man,
chickens
we
and
could
eggs,
look
right?
we could look it back on this in 10, 12 years, and Li Bin could be crazy like a fox because he's building a foundation. We're at millions and millions of swaps, 60 million. And so it's a cumulative effect. Okay. Now he just needs to sell more cars, number one, to recruit more OEM partners, number two, and then so I'll make a quick comment because you said swapping works. Swapping works in Asia for sure, and not only on the passenger vehicles because we know about Gogoro in Taiwan. Okay, now there's an economics and there's a number of transactions that need to happen in order for the economics to kind of work out. And in the Europe and the United States, cities just aren't as big, so swapping might not work in every single city in North America or Europe, but there's definitely um, a an appetite, I think, number one. Number two, um, a financial model that works in Europe and North America. And so as battery pricing goes down, as more off-grid clean energy
Hmm.
storage works even more, I think we'll start to see swapping as an option. But to your point, Lay, the standardizing in order to get um, more transactions within each swapping station, that's going to be the important part.
Yeah.
And there's no, outside of Ample, and we know Levi Tillman works for Ample, um, who I should mention, they're working and cooperating with some entities in Japan. So
Yeah.
Japan is even looking at swapping. So
Yeah. And a few things I think worth mentioning. I think the standardization is really Robin was really driving this message, right? So for the battery swapping to work, standardization, and then this ecosystem, right? Cloud, operational side of things, cloud is very important. Scale, economies of scale, and then the probably biggest of them all is sharing that if I'm a
that
Zeekr, I
burden,
can
that
swap.
financial
Yeah,
burden.
yeah, I can swap at a Neo, or if I'm a some other brand, I can swap at a Neo.
One
Swap.
thing we should always remember too, Lay, is that these swap stations can um, can act as energy storage systems too
Yeah, that's
that back up the
also
grid.
mhm, mhm. The balancing of the grid. Yeah, that's also very important. Um, yeah, and then I think the other huge the ET9 is the Halo car, right? It's got all the latest and the greatest. There's bunch of global debuts on this car that's never been found in any car before, right? The steer by wire. Supposedly, Neo claims it's the first China approved or globally known passenger car with steer by wire. You had to actually apply for a permit from the MIT to get approved. And then
So
obviously Clear
let me
Motion.
explain
Yeah,
what steer by wire is. So basically, there's no steering column.
right.
There, it's just digitally connected,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Cybertruck has steer by wire.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so Tesla has famously adopted, because whether you like the Cybertruck or not, physically, design wise, it's one of the most advanced electric vehicles in the world. It's probably the most advanced electric vehicle in the world. And one of the reasons is 48 volts. They moved to 48 volts, but they also have like things like steer by wire, and some of the manufacturing on the body style side has really changed the game and opened up a lot of ways to alternately build exterior um, panels. Anyways, back to what we were talking about. So
Yeah,
steer by wire needs to be approved by the MIIT.
and it has. And then the active suspension from Clear Motion obviously is going on this.
Exact
Uh,
left clear
yeah,
motion. I don't know if
yeah.
you saw
Well,
that.
yeah.
So
So well, hopefully it's they
so
can
let
continue
me take a
supplying.
step back here. Let me take a step back here, Lay, because I'm in Detroit and I talk to suppliers, tier ones, tier twos, OEMs quite often. And think of it from the standpoint of how many steering column suppliers there have to be. And now that we don't need steering columns, but they might have supplied hundreds of thousands of steering columns so they made enough money or generated enough revenue to be profitable. And so that's their main business. They might also do other things, a tier one, tier two, tier three supplier. And it's not just Leishing steering column company. It's who you bought components from to
Yeah,
build the steering column, the raw materials to build it, the electronic components, the chemical components. And in the automotive space, chemical means plastic because plastic is a chemical. And so whenever you see, and it's a B2B thing, so we don't talk about it that much, but when you take out an entire steering column, that affects upstream suppliers like big time. And if you're not
yeah,
prepared to lean into a new technology in order to keep generating revenue, because we also know that automotive is a very FOMO and a very copycat sector. So if Tesla sees success in steer by wire, if NIO sees success in steer by wire, everyone's going to adopt it eventually.
the same for the other way around. This end-to-end game large language model, everybody's following Tesla steps, right? I think I've heard that it looks like the FSD, the latest one that with the one button push parking and parking. Some of the Chinese media are saying actually that's the most advanced um, division only on the planet right now. Even though we know things are pretty advanced on the ADAS side here in China. So, I mean, right? Um,
But they're speculating. Chinese media is speculating because
yeah,
they don't have FSD in China yet.
yeah,
So I think they're relying heavily on what Tesla is saying behind the scenes.
yeah,
And I think part of that is Tesla just trying to build up excitement about their technology in order to try to carve out a place in the market that's already pretty crowded when it comes to intelligent driving systems in China. So
yeah.
let's move on, Lay, to that tweet just before we got on about year-end numbers from the ministry.
So the so-called consumer trade-in, the Chinese term is called 以旧换新, which literally means you're bringing the old and changed to the new, right? 以旧换新. The Ministry of Commerce had a press conference this afternoon, gave out some latest numbers. And it looks like over 5 million combined this kind of the scrap and trade-in numbers. Now these numbers I have to double check because they could mean different things. I don't think they actually mean sales. I think they mean applications submitted uh, this year, and most of that is driven by this updated policy where you trading scrap old vehicle toward a purchase of an NEV, you get 20,000 RMB. Toward an ICEV, you get 15,000. This was increased at about mid-year in July, I think. And then over 1 million vehicles were kind of scrapped, recycled in November. And actually, they showed some good numbers for the joint ventures, for the foreign brands. They have really
Yeah, I
benefited.
saw that.
interesting, right? 35% of these added new vehicle sales came out of these foreign brands. So thank goodness. And then the retail sales, right? The automotive retail sales became kind of a net positive to the overall consumer goods sales, whereas early in the year, they dragged down the consumption of the consumer goods sales. So that just shows again really how important this policy has been to the overall economy. We know that, right? We were discussing about the kind of the housing market. It's not well, but and I think also the Commerce Ministry hinted they're discussing about what to do for 2025, and I think these type of trade-in incentive policy will continue into 2025, just because of the economy and that they have worked. Um, you know,
So that should always be in the back of people's minds. The Chinese economy. You're on the ground right now. Um, I still talk to people quite often, obviously every day, that are living in China, and yeah, the economy is still struggling, and
challenging.
so
You know,
yeah,
just be blunt.
um, and you and I just talked about square meter pricing for real estate has gone down quite significantly in a lot of the cities, and we are going to have an early Chinese New Year next year in 2025. I think it's January 29th is Chinese New
Yep.
Year. And normally the Chinese government will roll out uh, some economic incentives after Chinese New Year. We also know that He Xiaopeng, a few others have talked about the price war lasting through 2025. Don't see that changing, which means, to your point, these incentives will likely continue in some way, shape, or form. They might differ in the amounts, they might differ in the types of incentives, but and I would think we would start seeing some weak players, a la a Neta, a Jiyue, start to wobble
Well,
in the middle or late 2025. So if not sooner.
well, I mean, we can talk about Jiyue a little bit. Jiyue, uh, our good friend Frank Wu is there, and I do know a few other employees there that have basically posted on WeChat Moments saying, "It's sad, but I'm done at Jiyue." And the latest happening is their PR director got canned because he posted something that was not helping the situation, apparently. And then what was good about this incident, and I would say maybe one of my top 10 news of the year, just because of the way that this kind of the sudden death, is that Geely and Baidu, they have agreed to
They stepped
cover
up.
the,
They're-
yeah, they have agreed to cover the kind of the payments, the N+1 payments, and continuing to support whether it's service or whether it's the system, the vehicle system for these owners. And interestingly enough, what has surprised me is the um, the unity among the owners in saying that we support Jiyue. We are not going to kind of, we like our cars,
yeah,
and these are
abandon
really good
the
cars.
brand.
Yeah, and somehow this thing has turned both negative and positive in a way because of the way the sudden death. And in the last few days, Zhou Xia has been silent. So
Joe Xia, the CEO
yeah,
of GU.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm getting
It's
more and
yeah,
more. of the impression that Jiyue is closing up shop. They're not really. I'm sure they're looking for a white knight to come in, but I get the impression that uh, they're going to cease to be an automotive company.
Yeah.
And we know that Geely and Baidu were trying to not get dragged into the 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 mess, but they did step up and said we're going to pay for the social uh, uh, I don't know, the financial
Yeah,
support for the
so
employees that are
yes,
affected.
the payments, the social, I guess social security payments,
Yeah, I don't know how to say it in English, I guess, but
compensation. Um, yeah,
and
yeah,
so this is just a reminder, like we talk about all these ridiculous numbers, 60 million swaps, 27 million vehicles, but when an individual company fails, I mean, there's real people that are affected by it. And I've spoken to a couple of people at GUA or former employees, and they're really depressed. They were drinking the Kool-Aid. To your point, these were not the reason they went under isn't because the products are crap. Their products, to your point about the owners, are really good. Uh,
too good
they,
maybe.
yeah,
Eh,
but
That's the
the
irony. That's the irony. You know.
and the other really important part that should be emphasized is that they had two of the largest backers in China, and they weren't able to make a business out of it. So and that tells you that Baidu doesn't want to get into car manufacturing. That's all.
Not
That's
as
what
much
that says.
as not as determined as Xiaomi, of course. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think Baidu really sees more opportunity in
Uh,
autonomous vehicles and generative AI and things like that. So
and Huawei is really the other um, mirror, right? That reflects, uh, you know, right? They did an event where the Richard Yu was um, talking with the four chairmen of their four brands on CCTV on CGTN, and that was quite interesting. It's a very unique model that became successful, starting with the Ito, um, that the
but
Huawei's way.
but you and
And
I know there's
yeah,
a ton of pressure on Richard Yu, a ton of
sure,
pressure
sure,
to
sure,
grow
sure,
very, very, very quickly.
sure.
So
Um, yeah, that's
so um anything else you want to talk about, man?
yeah. We talk about Neo, Jiyue, the
Actually,
market.
let's stop here for a second. Let's talk Nissan Honda. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
this is where probably you will, take. I'll have you take more uh, your opinions. Um, it's
Hold on.
it's the I think it's the shakeout. It's the reset that I talked at the very beginning, right? It's not only in China but globally we're seeing this reset. Early innings.
So a bit of history. I'm not an expert on Japanese automakers, uh, for sure, but we know that Carlos Ghosn was the co-CEO of Nissan and Renault. They had a huge alliance, and Nissan, their products, they're nice products. They're great products, I think, but you know, Carlos Ghosn just left a mess. Okay, and for those that don't know, he was the CEO. Uh, he was indicted in Japanese court and escaped basically a trial and potentially imprisonment in Japanese jail in a instrument case. So now he's back
5 years ago.
in, yeah, he's back in Lebanon, is it?
2019,
Uh,
end of 2019. Yeah.
and so Nissan sent over their CFO to start managing things, I think, in China. The Japanese government doesn't want to get involved and bail them out. And so I think they had a discussion with Honda, who already has announced a partnership with Nissan in March of this year. And Honda's kicking the tires on acquiring Nissan, it sounds like. Now, anecdotally, I there's a motor mall near my home where I picked up my Ionic 5. Next to Hyundai dealership, there's an Infinity dealership. Nissan's luxury brand is Infinity. Honda's is Acura. Toyota's is Lexus. So they all have a luxury brand. That closed up shop. So the Infinity dealership is no longer open. And they don't really sell that many products in the United States. They don't sell that many products, and I'm talking Nissan, that many products in China. And obviously, they're a tier below Toyota and Honda in Japan. And so the this is like the GM and Ford stuff in 2009, 2008, where there's bankruptcies, right? GM went bankrupt, FCA went bankrupt. And so a large part of this is due to not only Ghosn leaving a mess, but their inability to really break through in the US and China markets. And so the wild card, and this is the more interesting part for me, is I'm going to take a moment, Lay, to pat myself on the back because I had mentioned, what, a year ago, maybe months ago, that tech companies were going to look at struggling automakers. And there is an article about Foxconn also kicking the
Foxconn.
tires. And
Uh,
so this is going to happen. This is the most interesting thing. It's can Foxconn turn around a car company? I don't know. But you better believe that Amazon's corp dev team, Google's corp dev team, I'm not saying they seriously looked at acquiring Nissan, but they had to have been, well, what do you guys think? And I'm sure conversations have been had between investment banks that
if,
help the tech companies and investment banks that help Nissan and stuff like that. So
if history is a lesson, uh, is this do weak plus weak equals strong? If history is a lesson, look at what is happening with Stellantis. They're number 4, I believe, right? Number 4, and with Honda and Nissan added together, I think they become the number 3, right?
3, then
Behind
they come.
behind Volkswagen and Toyota, right? So
And in my prediction, Lay, is that Volkswagen still is trying to find a bottom, so they could Nissan an alliance between Honda and Nissan could become number 2 quickly, pretty easily. So
yeah, so I'll just the predicament of the fallout of the foreign brands. If we talk about Honda, one example is guess how much the Accord sells now, the transactional pricing
hmm,
with all the discounts.
不知道
Take a guess.
170,000 RMB.
Slightly over 100,000.
Oh,
You can get an Accord. So just
so we're
one
talking
example.
so for
Accord.
those who don't have an FX or foreign currency exchange in their mind, that's about $16,000.
Yeah. So Accord, when back in the early days, about like 20 years ago, I remember people were willing to pay more for something that was 300,000 RMB, close to 300,000 RMB. That was back in the days, right? And now right? There's one example of how bad things are and how pricing have deteriorated. The kind of the pricing premium, right? And that's hence, right? The Mini, they had to cut prices for their new EVs down to the 150,000 range, and now they're seem to sell, and that's where Firefly is gonna be, right? That kind of price range.
So for those wondering, especially in the United States, currently an Accord goes for over 30,000 US dollars, the
Yeah,
starting MSRP.
yeah,
So I the other thing I wanted to talk about before we look at the comments, and so thanks for everyone that has thrown in comments. We'll get to them in 1 second. I know that Jeffrey has put a few things. He's going to be going to Guangzhou, so you'll probably see him, Lay.
yeah. We'll
Uh,
see you there.
and there was a terrific article by Keith Bradsher for the New York Times talking about General Motors and their struggles and how they were 1, 2, 3 in sales in China not too long ago, and they are currently 16th. And so this goes back to the write down, the $5 billion write down, the new strategies for product and leadership, and also pointing to renegotiating the JV contract with SAIC in the background of Rising Auto, IM Motors being launched by SAIC over the last few years as well. So very, very interesting. Keith is an OG. He's been in Taiwan. He's been in Shanghai. He's been in Beijing. He's a bureau chief for New York Times. It's a longer piece, but it's great. Gives you a lot of history, things that we already knew about Lay because
Yeah.
our close ties to the industry, are being American, and so worth a read for sure. Not anything too surprising out of there if you've been following China EVs and more or Sino-Auto Insights over the last several years, but worth a click. So let me see. So Conrad Layson, who we both know, he says, FYI, Stellantis International, the JV with Leap Motors assembling CKDs in Poland for European consumption. We knew that. US rules around FEOCs prevent Stellantis International from doing this in the US. CATL and WeLion are NIO's two battery cell suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we see battery swapping get rationalized in the China market? So far, swapping is proprietary, NIO or CATL standards. So, so we kind of mentioned that and talked about that, right? Just there could be two standards, and then NIO kind of on the premium side, and then CATL. To your point about Firefly, maybe adopting the CATL standard on the budget or mass market side.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the comments from LinkedIn, and this is what's super confusing, man. I'm looking at multiple platforms for questions. Uh, So Firefly may be the first CATL swap partner. That's from Wasim. Yes, that's what
Well,
you had mentioned,
yeah.
Lay.
Well, we said it's a wild card, right?
Yeah.
And I guess by this time tomorrow night, maybe we'll know. But it looks like, well, based on what CATL has revealed, their first 10 OEM partners, they do not include NIO. So it could be
So
entirely NIO's own, because NIO has said that it's completely different battery swap
right.
network because the pack sizes are different.
So Jeffrey writes back, possibly, but I understand the Firefly brand battery is a higher technology level and liquid cooled, which might exclude it. And then Wasim responds, NIO CEO said that first model from a partner to adopt swapping is already on testing.
Yes,
So
he said that. Yeah, he said that recently in that face-to-face media event a week ago. Yeah.
So let's do some housekeeping. I don't see any other comments. We will probably not do next week. And then last week of the year, we'll get back on to our live show. We'll do the year end review. So you and I have some homework,
Yeah,
Lay.
and hopefully
Um,
I'll be stateside by then. I think I
and
should be,
then
because
so for those of you that have enjoyed this, we will take a rest. So happy holidays to everyone, and then we will. Let me look at the calendar.
well, next up is CES, and CES really lots of surprises coming. I just
Okay,
I
yeah.
just
So
saw. Guess who's exhibiting at CES?
so as far as I know, it's Zeekr, Xpeng, Deep Route will be there.
Well,
Anyone else?
well, Xpeng via the Aero HT.
Yep.
They'll show that carrier. Yeah,
Hmm.
that anyone else is a company called Great Wall Motor. They'll be at West
Uh,
Hall. Interesting, right? At this point of time. Uh,
so
I think CES is still the stage to be at. Whatever the geopolitical environment, the Chinese will be there.
oh, I should mention
Yeah.
yesterday I was on Autoline with
Yes.
the
You
CEO
talked to
of
Gary, right?
CES, Gary Shapiro. So it's weird. Gary's actually from Michigan, and
Oh,
he lives near me. And he basically gets on a plane to DC because CES is actually a trade show that's run by the CTA, Consumer Trade Association,
yeah. Yep.
and he said that for those of you that want to listen to his update on CES this year and listen to me and my comments. Now we didn't really completely talk about automotive, so we talked really broadly, and quite frankly, they talked about nuclear energy, and I was like, "All right, that's not my swim lane, so I'm not going to be talking about that." But man, Gary, man, I learned a lot. He wrote a new book, Pivot or Die,
Yeah.
and so I'm looking forward to picking that up. But it was cool talking to him because obviously somebody who's new to CES, he did want to circle back and talk to me after my experience at CES. So I'll probably see him, mid January to have a discussion. Oh, the other thing too, I rode in a May Mobility robotaxi, an
Oh, cool.
unmanned May Mobility robotaxi. So I did
But
that
within
yesterday.
the area, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so out in Ann Arbor is about 30 minutes from downtown Detroit, out in the burbs. It's the city where the University of Michigan is, where May Mobility is headquartered. The suburbs at 2 o'clock were pretty quiet, nothing too aggressive going on. I was impressed. Again, I don't recall there was a naked left. We didn't get much faster than 35 miles an hour, in suburban streets. So were there any iffy or weird parts of the ride? It was only about 20 minutes, and so I'm gonna try to. They
Yeah.
have pilots in Detroit as well, so I'll try to get in Detroit where it's a little more hectic, and
Yeah.
then I should get back a full report. But yeah,
Yeah, it's like a shuttle. It's definitely not Waymo. So probably going very slow, controlled environment.
it was a Toyota, the
Oh,
minivan.
a
What's the minivan
minivan,
called? Yeah,
the Sienna.
it wasn't the shuttle. It was, yeah. So
Oh, it was a Sienna.
again, so it was
Okay.
weird. First of all, it was a petrol engine vehicle. They took the front passenger seat out, and that's where they put the computer. So the fan was really loud. You could hear it. There was a screen. So there were captain's chairs in the second row, and there was a screen in the middle. And similar to Waymo, you press a button to let them know you're ready. You put your seatbelt on, you press the button, let them know you're ready. And actually, there was a May Mobility employee that checked us in and kind
Mm.
of answered questions as we were going on our ride. So that was really helpful. And maybe for somebody with less experience in robotaxis, that's probably reassuring to have a May Mobility employee there to answer
Yeah.
questions and explain why the robotaxi is doing what it's doing. But for me, I would have preferred just to sit in there and really focus on what it was doing. It was cool being able to ask him questions, so that was important as well. But yeah, so now I just need to try out the Wave, the British company who's doing
Yeah.
things in London
Mm,
and San Francisco. So yeah. But
cool.
everyone, uh, thanks for joining us as always. Happy holidays. We hope that you're able to spend some quality time with your friends and family. Be recharged for a 2025 that's going to be interesting to say the least. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Likewise, and very much looking for the Neo Day tomorrow, and just actually meeting a lot of people that old friends, both at Neo and outside of Neo. It's going to be a huge, huge event
It's going to
in
be a
terms of
KOL
number of
reunion,
people.
isn't it?
In terms of number of people attending, and there's specific instructions on what you need to do. Uh, so, yeah, I mean, they built this huge um, venue in this island in the middle of Guangzhou. It's called the Haixinsha. Uh, yeah, it's you know,
Looking forward to your update, man.
yeah.
I'll
All
catch
right.
you on DMs, dude.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.